Hi, everybody. It's Peter Nixon, and I'm here to record another story for you. So let me share my screen. This one's kind of exciting. Special thanks to Father Mark for teaching me about a story I didn't know existed in the Bible. This particular story comes from uh, Matthew 15, verse 21 to 28. It tells a story of a woman who goes to Jesus and begs for food, begs for help for her sick daughter. And she gets rebuked. And it's the only time I've ever heard of a story in the Bible where you maybe aren't too impressed with how Jesus responds. And it's useful because it reminds me of who's the teacher. Basically, reminded Jesus of who is the teacher. As the story in the Bible is told by Matthew, she responds three times and is rebuked twice. First, as you can see, she says, "Lord, have mercy. Please, my daughter is ill." And he essentially ignores her and is reminded by his apostles that you should be ignoring people like that. She's not one of us. And she persists a second time and says, "Lord, please help me." And again, he ignores her. He ignores her by suggesting that we would feed the dogs before we would feed you. And then she persists a third time. And she says, "Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their maker's table." And when he hears this third response from her, he has a change of heart and looks after her and says that her daughter will be mercifully healed of her illness. It's a great reminder, a great parable of who is your teacher, actually. He is reminded that he is to be helping everyone, not just the chosen few. And I'm also reminded that people who persist three times usually get what they want. So as a negotiation story, this is also a useful reminder. If you are wanting something from others, you need to persist three times. Not just say the same thing over and over like a parrot, but actually to justify and mercifully ask for what you're asking for of the person who keeps saying no. You may be their teacher. This story also reminds me of being in other situations where I was reminded of who is the teacher. One of my trips that I will always remember, I went to Rangoon, and I wanted to visit Rangoon while Aung San Suu Kyi was under house arrest. She was at the time considered one of the great teachers of the world, and although she's fallen out of favor now because of her seemingly lack of mercy for the Rohingya people, my trip to Rangoon included visiting the Shwegadon Pagoda. And when I was there, as I visit pagodas around the world, I wanted to pick up a souvenir. It's an amazing complex. I believe it is the oldest standing pagoda in the world, going way, way, way back thousands of years. And it is therefore visited by thousands and thousands of pilgrims on a daily basis who usually come before or after the monsoon rains, which are the heaviest rains I've ever seen. When you arrive at the Shwegadon Pagoda, you'll be very impressed with the entrance and the steps. And the entrance is the same as it was when I subsequently found out my uncle was there in World War II, and it was the scene of some of the worst fighting. The World War II fighting in Burma is well known. And the steps into and up to the Shwegadon Pagoda were famous then, and they're famous today. And it was on these steps where I picked up my souvenir Buddha. And I negotiated for a long time. I persisted. I told the carver exactly which one I wanted. One of the most beautiful pieces, well carved, beautifully painted, and negotiated a difficult price. For me, it was not a lot of money. For the artist, it was a lot of money. And I subsequently realized that perhaps I negotiated a little bit too hard, because when I got home and unwrapped, I found that the Buddha that he actually gave me was not the one on the right that seemed so beautiful and finished, but it was the one on the left. It was one that I keep on my desk now. It, it became my teacher. This unfinished Buddha that wasn't the one I negotiated for. It was far from complete, requires uh, days, if not weeks, of effort to finalize. You can see that the carving is not finished. The painting hasn't even started. And yet it becomes, for me, one of the most beautiful Buddhas. If you know anything about Buddhism, you know that people who try hard to do the right thing and to live in the right way emerge to become Buddhas. They first become bodhisattvas, like the art on the right-hand side. So this artist actually became my teacher and reminded me that I shouldn't be negotiating so hard to part with my money when I'm in an emerging market and showing essentially disrespect to the artist. He was quite right to do a swap when I wasn't noticing on the steps. And instead of putting in the finalized version, the Buddha statue that I had negotiated for, he swapped in this unfinished version, which has now become one of my greatest Buddhas in my collection. So I asked the question, who is your teacher? And if in fact you have a teacher, are you listening? Same story as Jesus was facing in Matthew. The story came back to me again on another trip. I was visiting Calcutta. And when you visit Calcutta, you want to visit the missionaries of charity, the Sisters of Mercy, who Mother Teresa made famous around the world and has now been canonized for her great work. This is her tomb, which you can visit when you go. But of course, when you go, you're also going to be in the throngs of the crowds of Calcutta with beggars all over. And certainly there was lots of beggars when I arrived. And you arrive typically from an expensive hotel in a taxi. So as a rich foreign tourist, you can be spotted immediately. And this lady with her son or daughter turned up at my taxi door even before I stepped out and was begging for money. And I did my best to ignore her. I stepped out, I paid my taxi driver, and I started walking towards what I thought was Mother Teresa's home. And the beggar actually called out in a lovely voice, and she said, "Are you looking for Mother Teresa's home?" And I said, "Yes, in fact, I am." And she said, "Oh, you're walking in the wrong direction. Let me show you." And then she offered her hand, which I didn't take. And she said, "Follow me." And we walked in the opposite direction down the crowded street until we got to the entrance of Mother Teresa's mother house, where the Sisters of Mercy have worked for so long. And of course, feeling terrible about how I had treated this lovely lady on the street, I gave her some money to say thank you for showing me the way to the door. And perhaps that was the greatest reminder for me again when I visited Mother Teresa's mother house in Calcutta, was the question again, who is your teacher? And when the teacher is teaching, are you listening? Two important lessons that only came to me later when I reflected on these two trips. And so I thank Father Mark for bringing forward that passage and reminding me to listen to your experience. Try, if you can, while you're in the midst of the experience, to recognize the wrongfulness of your ways so that you can correct them and do better next time. Thanks for this moment. Keep trying. Bye.